Okay, so for the first part, you're going to need to get your wire, 20 gauge wire, cut it, use your pliers, slightly make a bend at the very end, and then get a ball of gum paste and turn it into a cone shape. Now this is the option if you don't have the cell buds, which you can still order online. I think those are made of styrofoam, I believe. They're lighter, and you probably wouldn't need to dry them. But since we're trying to use the things that we got, let's use this. And then dip the very end of the wire in edible glue and stick it in. The only drawback to this method is drying time. So once you stick that in, you need to wait until it's fully dry. One of the things that I learned from this process is there's no instant gratification. So we have to wait until it's dry. So I pre-made something like this. So let's just set that aside. And then roll out your gum paste. Not very thinly. I would say I would leave the top and the very bottom a little thicker, just so we could insert the wires on those ends. If you would buy a tool called a cell pad, I learned that through Jacqueline. A cell pad would enable you to have a thicker part at the place where you're going to put your wire. But if you don't have it, this is another way to kind of mimic that effect. So if you can see closely, the top is thicker than the middle. Alright, so initially we're going to use the smallest one. My count here is I'm going to need 5 for the first layer and 5 for the second. And we don't need wires yet. So, oh, before I forget, you're going to use this too. The foam pad that you see at Michael's, I don't even have the top part, so we're just using what we have for now. But we're going to use this one too. And if you have the more sophisticated one used by flower makers, that would be great. Alright, but if you have this, let's settle for it. Let's use it. Alright, so we're going to need 5, and we're going to need to have to work fast. Alright, so make sure that the bases are a little bit thicker, just so you can get used to that one. 3, 4, 5. And every time you work with gum paste and you don't need it immediately, and you still wanted it rolled out, just cover it with clear wrap. Alright, so here we go. I'm going to use this side and then put a little shortening at the tip of your ball tool. Don't be frustrated if you don't have the more expensive one. This is going to work just fine. The objective here, why we use this pad, is to increase the surface area, make this one thinner. So we're going to go from this side to this side, just pushing it in very carefully. So what I try to do here is you roll it out, press to the side until you see that the very sides are not really thick anymore. So let's do that for all of them. That's the initial part. The sides, and then we're going to go back and do one more sweep to curve the whole petal. And don't worry, they don't look uniform. That's the objective. If this looks uniform, then it won't look like a natural flower. All right. If you can see closely, they're a little bit thinner at the very end. All right, so then go back and do another sweep, and this time press harder and go towards the middle. Let's do a deeper roll in the middle, and then all right, again, the only drawback in having to use foam is that or this technique, is that you lose the veins. If you have a veiner, and then you get just a little bit of foam pattern at the very back, doesn't really show it. Anyway, let's use the one that I have already dried, and it will look like this. Use edible glue to moisten the very bottom, and since this is a closed peony, we're gonna have to cover the whole part. Alright, I hope we can do it against this. Alright, yeah, there, hope you can see. Alright. So put one petal and have the next one overlap, and if you want it to be a little more secure, brush some of the edible glue on the side where it's gonna touch the other petal, overlap, turn it, overlap it again, I'm trying to see if it's clear in the camera. And at the very end, two sides. So we're going to close this first layer. Alright, there you can see that it looks closed, and we let this dry, and then while we're letting it dry, let's move on making 5 more of these using the same technique. So let me do that, and then I'll show you how to assemble it. Okay, so for this stage I already made 5 more of the same petals from the smallest cutter, and this is the bud of the flower, having used the 5 first petals. So it's the same technique that we had with the first layer. Lightly brush the very bottom, but this time it's not going to be too tight, so we're gonna let it or too closed. We want it to open up just a little bit more, so we're not going to press too much to have it closed. So it's the same technique. Again, when you do this, just make sure that the inner part is, if possibly, dry. That's one thing I learned from making this, that you can't force it. You can do it, but it's not going to come out as good as you would want it. Alright, so for this stage, if you look at it closely, we can make it open up a little bit better and stay this way, 2 ways. You can either hang it upside down like this, or again put it back in a flower former and just put clear wrap. Alright, it's coming out. Okay, I'll put clear wrap on the very outer part, and let's have that dry again.